G'day everyone, welcome to another edition of Chris Rankin's Music Crush. Just doing a contest entry and a congratulations. The most important thing is congratulations to Logan at Swellheads Network. Really good channel, particularly love the wall of records behind every time, and has a really decent range, really big range actually, just all sorts of stuff. So I always enjoy watching his videos, and he's just got to 700 subscribers. In fact, he got to 700 subscribers a while ago. So he's got a contest going, and I thought I'd enter the contest. So I'll put the link to his channel in the description below. And so his contest was an interesting one, and he took a little while to clarify it. So I know it's been interpreted a few different ways. First of all, he called it the OnlyFans contest, and I think it's also been called the Number One Fans contest. So he wanted you to show 5 albums of bands that the bands are maybe not that well known by everyone, particularly on the VC perhaps, and you feel like you're probably their number one fan, and it's just a way of showing them off a little bit. So I'll get started. Don't want to make it go too long as it's a contest entry. So start off. People who know me pretty well know that this band, in fact, they'll probably know all 5 bands that are in this. One of them is just a solo artist actually. So people that know me well won't be surprised by any of these. But the first one is the band Jasad. Now, they are a death metal band from Indonesia. They come from Bandung in Jawa Barat. Absolutely fantastic band. Well and truly in my top 10 bands of all time. This album here, I think, is one of the best death metal albums ever made. They do combine a little bit of traditional Indonesian music in there as well. Most of this album, pretty much all of this album is all about traditional Indonesian stories and culture and so forth. But make no mistake, they are brutal. But they're not just brutal for brutal's sake. Very catchy, very addictive. They started 1990. Took a little while to get going. Then they had their first EP called C'est la Vie. Came out in 1995. Then you had, I'm spacing the album that came out in 2001. No, I can't remember it now. I'll come back to it. Annihilate the Enemy was the next one, the second album that came out. And then you had this album, Rebirth of Jati Sunda, which came out in 2013. And then last year they had an EP coming out called 5, which was actually one of the highest albums on my list of 2019, and it was an EP. But this is one of my favourite death metal albums of all time. The last sort of 5 or 6 years, they've really started branching out into the world. They've started performing at some big European festivals, Bloodstock, Wacken as well. There was another one that escapes me as well. If you want to check them out, one of my favourite song of theirs all time, and it's one of probably my top 10 metal songs of all time, is a song called Siliwangi. And if you want to check them out and see what they're like live and just check them out, type in Jasad and Siliwangi into the YouTube, and it'll come up with a Bloodstock 2015 performance, and watch that. Just so good. They're the only band in the last 20 years that's got me into the mosh pit. My knees are not so great, and so I don't like to risk them anymore. I used to a lot in the 90s, but not anymore. But whenever I see this band live, I just cannot resist. It's just so addictive, so good. The riffs are just magnificent. You just want to headbang the whole time, and I absolutely love this band. And yes, they're starting to get a lot more exposure all around the world now, but every time I tell people to check them out, I sort of not harp on, but come on, you got to check them out. And when they actually do, people instantly get back to me. Oh, Chris, that was unbelievable. I've had a few friends who are overseas in Europe And I told them they were coming. I said, make sure you find what stage they're on and go on and see them. Yeah, I will. And then they couldn't stop writing to me and telling me just how damn good they were. Fantastic band. And yeah, that's my number one pick, Jasad. Jasad means corpse in Bahasa Indonesia. The second one, I've shown this album, I think once or twice before. This is an amazing album. Now, let me try and describe this as best I can, and I'll paint you a picture. Now, first of all, you might not believe it by looking at the cover, but this is a black metal album. Now, the band is called White Ward. They come from Ukraine, Odessa, Ukraine. This was a 2019 album. This actually won my album of the year in 2019 out of a very large sample. Every year I do a top 100 albums, and this was number one in 2019. So, it's black metal, but it's black metal mixed with jazz, mixed with a little bit of soul, but not really, mostly jazz. And it's a concept album, and it's all about the underbelly of a city. So the way to picture this album is, think of it's a smoky bar at 1 a.m. in the morning, and there's not many people around, and you've got a detective in the late 40s telling you all his gritty stories about life as a detective in the underbelly of the city. Now picture that set to the backdrop of black metal music mixed with jazz, and it's a complete concept story and everything. It is a perfect album. I love this album. I cannot rave about this album enough. I will continue to rave about this band and album forever. I know it did gain a little bit of traction, but I've never seen anyone else show it on the VC. Still extremely, relatively unknown, unfortunately. I won't say underrated, because the people that know it rate it extremely highly, but maybe doesn't quite get enough love. And, I even heard the band, a couple of people said, well, you're a black metal band, where's the icy forests and the snow and the cold nastiness? And one of the band members said, well, a cold underbelly of a city can be just as cold and dark and icy and unforgiving and certainly not warm at all. So that's why they've gone for that look, which is a great take, a very interesting take and angle on black metal. And there's been a few really good bands lately mixing black metal with jazz. Imperial Triumphant is another one who are doing it so well. But this is, this album it's flawless for me. It's one of the best concept albums of all time, and yes, it is right up there with Operation Mindcrime and A Dream Theater Metropolis Part 2, The Seventh Son of the Seventh Son, all that. It is just absolutely magnificent. So yeah, White Ward, Love Exchange, Failure, fantastic. Next, I'm going to go with this will be no surprise to people who know me well also. The band is from Vancouver, Canada. They have a unique sound. Now, they are brutal technical death metal. Now, while they're in the last sort of 6 or 7 or 8 years has been a major flood of technical death metal, this band is very different. One, their drummer Spencer Pruitt is one of the fastest drummers on planet Earth. If you want, go and check him out on YouTube. Have a look at one of his drum playthroughs. He is just ridiculous. It's almost like you want to film him at a different speed and slow it down just so you can see what he's doing. He is just ridiculously fast. Now, they are brutal and they are technical death metal, but there's a lot of prog that comes through, a lot of prog rock. So instead of all the time the solos being mind-blowingly fast, they tend to be the slower, dreamier, Pink Floyd-y, Rush, King Crimson, that sort of stuff coming through. And also, their vocalist is extremely different to the normal death metal vocalist. It is a deep, heavy growl, but he has a machine gun style attack. So he actually comes from a hip hop background. Now, I don't want to scare anyone off. This is not rap metal, even though I do quite like it. It's not rap metal at all. But the way he delivers, his growls almost become like a second percussion instrument. And the growls and his phrasing and the syllables sort of become their own percussion. And it's extremely good. And I'm talking about the band Archspire. I love this band so much. Just love them to bits. Basically a rather large heavy metal promoter in Australia. I had been begging him for about 5 or 6 years. I first fell in love with this band in 2011 when their debut came out, not long after that. This is their second album called The Lucid Collective, and they have a third album called Relentless Mutation. So I'd been begging the promoter, a rather large metal promoter in Australia, about this band. Please bring them, please bring them, please bring them. And in the end, he said, you know what, I'm going to do it. You're a good dude, I'm going to do it. Obviously, it's not just for me, that's just ridiculous to think. But yeah, I think he finally listened and thought it was a good idea. And that was a very successful gig and a successful tour. I did get to meet them on that tour. After the gig, I met up with Ollie, the vocalist, and had a bit of a chat, which is a really great moment. Yeah, so Archspire, the Lucid Collective. If you want to check out one of the best songs, the title track is Unreal. It's not exactly the word-for-word title track. It's called Lucid Collective Somnambulation. But my favourite song on here is called Scream Feeding. It's just brilliant. You have the extremely heavy chugging, but fast riffs, you know, really, really heavy, satisfying. But then you have some really wonderful, dreamy, very 70s prog rock sort of solos and transcendent sort of parts as well, with Spencer's lightning fast drumming and then Ollie's just unique vocals. So that's Archspire from Vancouver, Canada. Absolutely brilliant. They are gaining a pretty good following now, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone on the VC show this band. But anyone that knows me knows how much of a big fan I am of them. Very large number of collection of T-shirts from that band. Probably my biggest outside of Maiden, Dream Theater, and Fear Factory for the amount of shirts I have, I think. But yeah. Next. Now, I have shown this band a few times before, but I feel it really fits the theme of this contest. So I'm talking about the band High Tension. I won't go into a big thing about them because I've talked about them a little bit in the past few videos. But basically, they're a band from Melbourne, Victoria. They started out as a hardcore punk band and then moved into more of a sludge hardcore sound. And on this album, they generally get described as heavy metal, extreme progressive metal, still with some sludge. And just, they're my favourite Australian metal band for sure. This album won my number one album of 2018. Magnificent. Red, White, Shame, Ghost to Ghost, Ula, Bite the Leash, Purge, Rise. Many of them are some of my favourite metal songs of all time. Now, they've got a pretty decent following in Australia, pretty big. They do come over to Perth, where I'm based, quite a few times. I always catch up with the vocalist, Karina, who's become I've become a pretty good friend of, and so we always catch up when they come over. But just I can't rave about this band enough, and I'll be pretty happy to say that I'm probably their number one fan, I guess. They've had 3 albums: Deathbeat, Bully, and then this one, Purge. So that's High Tension. So good, so good. And lastly, going to an artist, a solo artist, and she's definitely one of my favourite solo artists of all time, probably only just behind, a little bit second to Bowie, maybe, of all time. She's definitely my favourite female solo artist of all time, and I'm talking about Angun. Now, there's no way you could say that she's not known, because she's sold a lot of albums around the world, but I've never seen her shown on the VC, and she's not always, you don't always hear much about her, I guess, in sort of, you know, Australia, America, England and stuff like that, although she does do quite big concerts in those countries. She started out, she was born in Jakarta, Indonesia, had some good pop success in the early 90s in Indonesia. She started her own record label. She saved up with her own record label and released was it 4 albums in Indonesia. Then she went to Europe. She eventually moved to France and started to really launch out throughout the world, especially in Europe and France. What's really interesting about her career is that she's had 5 albums where she released a version in English and a completely separate version in French. So the songs and the music are basically the same, but the language is different, and it was a completely separate album for each one. She's also had 1 album that was only in English and another separate album that was only in French, and then she had 4 Indonesian language albums to start off with. And this is my favourite of hers. This is probably my favourite female solo artist album of all time. Yeah, I would say it's pretty much. It's called Snow on the Sahara. Snow on the Sahara was a big hit and single of this. Fantastic song. Absolutely fantastic song. So many, got Rose in the Wind. Just incredible artist. One of my favourite voices. Unfortunately, I still have never seen her live. Probably my number 1 artist to see on my bucket list for sure at this stage. If you want to check out any of her songs, she does a really good live of Selamanya, and she does a very good cover of Peter Gabriel, Don't Give Up. So she performs on stage with Peter Gabriel doing that duet of Don't Give Up. So if you want to check them out, great. So that's Angun. And there's my 5 only fans or number 1 fans that need of artists that you think should be spotlighted more or such. So once again, congratulations to Logan at Swellheads Networks. Please check out his channel. And thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch you all very soon. Thank you.